Hi, this is Joe from Mapamundi, and in today's video, I'd like to continue discussing the differences between Spanish and Portuguese. Now, as I said in my last video, obviously there are a lot of different varieties of Spanish, there are a lot of different varieties of Portuguese, but in this video, I'm going to focus on Brazilian Portuguese and the Spanish that's spoken in Latin America, so not the European versions of the two languages. So Spanish and Portuguese are extremely similar languages. They are both Romance languages, they're both Iberian languages, and the amount of mutual intelligibility between the two languages is actually pretty high. Somebody that speaks Spanish can understand a lot of what someone who speaks Portuguese is saying, and the other way around as well. They say that people who speak Portuguese generally have an easier time understanding Spanish than the other way around because the phonological inventory of Portuguese is a little bit higher and more complicated than that of Spanish. So it's easier for Portuguese speakers to interpret the words that are coming out of a Spanish speaker's mouth than the other way around. But today I'm not going to be focusing on phonological differences. Instead, I'm going to be focusing on grammatical differences. And there are a lot of grammatical differences between Spanish and Portuguese, actually, even though they are such similarly related languages. One place that Spanish and Portuguese differ is in the use of possessives. For example, if I were to say your car, and let's say I'm talking to tu, I would say tu carro. If I'm talking to somebody in Portuguese, I can say seu carro, or I can say o seu carro. So I can use the article in Brazilian Portuguese. It's not quite as common to use the article in Brazilian Portuguese as it is in European Portuguese, but still it's valid, and you do hear a lot of people do it in certain regions that they'll always say o seu carro, okay? And that obviously goes for the plural and the feminine versions as well. So I have os seus carros, I have a sua casa, and I have as suas casas, okay? In Spanish, we see the same thing. Obviously, we have to change the possessive adjective to tus carros, tu casa, tus casas, okay? But one place where it really differs is in the use of the possessive pronouns. And this is somewhere where Spanish is different from a lot of the other Romance languages. Spanish has its own possessive pronoun forms that are different from the possessive adjectives. So for example, if I were to say yours in Spanish and the thing is masculine and singular, I would say el tuyo. Plural is los tuyos, feminine la tuya, and plural feminine las tuyas, okay? So we can see that the word tu and the word tuyo are different. They're not used in the same way. One is an adjective and one is a pronoun. However, in Portuguese, if I want to say yours, I say o seu, I say os seus, I say a sua, or I say as suas. So those words are actually the same as the possessive adjective, but obviously we interpret them to be pronouns because we're dropping the noun. In a lot of other Romance languages, we see the same way that Portuguese does it, that the possessive adjective and the possessive pronoun are the same. It's the same in Italian. If you say something like my cat, it would be il mio gatto. But if I say mine, I say il mio. So the word mio, it's the same no matter whether it's being used as an adjective or a pronoun. For example, in the phrase you just heard me say, il mio gatto, we say il mio gatto. We have to have il. The only time we don't use il mio gatto, la mia casa, is when we have a singular family member. For example, if you say my father, it's mio padre. My mother is mia madre. We don't say il mio padre or la mia madre, but we do use them with things that are not singular family members, and with plural family members as well, obviously. The rule will be, so if you say my parents, it's I miei genitori. So we have to have the I there. But Spanish does not need to do that. You'd say mis padres. French, on the other hand, works the same as Spanish, where you don't need to say le mon livre, right? You just say mon livre. You don't need to say la mi, I don't know, maison. You say la maison or ma maison. And while we're on the topic of French, French actually does work the same as Spanish when it comes to possessive adjectives and possessive pronouns, in that the adjectives and the pronouns are different. I have mon for masculine singular for French, but I have le mien for mine. So it does work a little bit different in that regard. One thing that I notice a lot when I'm studying Portuguese and trying to speak Portuguese is the use of the article is pretty different from Spanish. We saw last week when we're using gustar expressions in Spanish that we typically have the definite article. For example, you say, me gusta el chocolate. You have to have the chocolate, even if you're just talking about chocolate as a generality and not a specific chocolate. But in Portuguese, you can say, eu gosto de chocolate. You don't need to have do chocolate unless you're talking about specific chocolate. So the use of the articles is different between Spanish and Portuguese. And one place that I notice that a lot is especially with countries. A lot of countries that don't take articles in Spanish do take articles in Portuguese. For example, you say, I went to Brazil in Spanish, you would say, fui a Brasil. And if you want to say, I went to Brazil in Portuguese, you'd say, eu fui para o Brasil. If you wanted to say, Chile is interesting in Spanish, you would say, Chile es interesante. And if you want to say it in Portuguese, you say, o Chile é interessante. One more example, if you say she's from Spain, in Spanish you say ella es de España. And if you want to say it in Portuguese, you say ela é da España. So é da España. Da is that contraction we saw last week of de plus a. I have da. Okay. So this is one example of where articles differ in Spanish and Portuguese, but it's not the only place. There are a lot of other places as well where you can hear articles being different, and I can talk about that in another video. One place that really differs a lot, in my opinion, especially when you're speaking a kind of colloquial, relaxed form of Brazilian Portuguese, is the use of the object pronouns. So in Spanish, we have the object pronouns, right? Direct object, lo, la, los, las. We have indirect, leles, or it can be se sometimes as well. And in Portuguese, you have them as well. You have o, a, os, as. You have lhe, okay, lhes. But those words, the object pronouns in Portuguese, they're not used in everyday life in colloquial Brazilian Portuguese. So let me show you how they get around that. Here we have some sentences in Spanish and Portuguese. For example, if you have I see him, it's lo veo. If you say I see him in Brazilian Portuguese, it's eu vejo ele. So a literal translation of Spanish is I see he. But from the word order, it's obvious that ele here is an object. And it's not high kind of formal speech in Brazilian Portuguese, but that is the way that the majority of people do talk. In Spanish, if I have, I gave her food, I would say, le diste comida a ella. The a ella is optional. If we already know what we're talking about, we don't need it. But in Portuguese, I say, você deu comida para ela, which means you gave food to her. And we can see that the para ela, it means to her as well, but I don't need the indirect object pronoun lhe in there. If you say in Spanish, I have them, los tengo. If you say I have them in Portuguese, tenho eles. So it's I have they, right? And if I say they brought them to him, in Spanish I say ellos se los trajeron a él. If I want to say it in Portuguese, I say eles trouxeram eles para ele. So I have they brought they to he. So the translations back into English are kind of nonsensical, but again, from the word order in Brazilian Portuguese, it's obvious that we're using these as objects. So that's the way that most people are going to speak in relaxed, everyday conversation in Brazilian Portuguese. So I hope this video was interesting for you. I know that the differences between Spanish and Portuguese, they sometimes seem a little bit small, but when you put them all together, you really do create such a different languages when it comes to sound, phonology, and also grammar, that they really are not the same language, even though sometimes you do hear people kind of make that assumption. People that don't really know about languages very well, they sometimes assume that Spanish and Portuguese are two different versions of the same language. Not true. They're two separate languages with their own identity, their own history, and their own grammars and pronunciation as well. So there are a lot more things to say about the difference between Spanish and Portuguese, and I'm going to cover those in future videos. So to see those videos and other ones just like it, subscribe to my channel Mapa Mundi Languages to see a new video coming out every Friday.